Welcome to Radical Self-Respect, everyone, where I help teach people how to not take any BS, how to avoid being manipulated, and of course, how to practice radical self-respect. This video will be a follow-up to the video I just previously made about Anthony Bourdain and his ordeal with his last text messages. And I want to make sure this video goes over actionable items and pragmatic steps to take. Say if you have someone in your life that may be in this kind of headspace. And I'm not talking out of my ass with this because I have volunteered for a self-deletion hotline in the past, and I'm going to go over a little bit about what we learned while there. But the first thing I would say to Anthony is, hey, this is a non-judgment zone. You can say whatever it is. Nothing you will say will surprise me, and you will not be judged by me. Whatever you have to say. When it comes to mental health, that is always the way I go about it first. And it always reminds me of what they asked Marilyn Manson when it came to the Columbine shooters. They asked him, Marilyn, because they had kind of tied the two together in the past, they said, Marilyn, what would you say to them? And he said, I wouldn't say a word. I would listen because that's something that no one else seems to be doing. And that's what I would do for Anthony. I would listen. I'd say, hey, tell me about what's going on with Asia. Tell me about your mental health. Tell me about what gets you excited. Tell me about your bouts of depression or the reasons why you want to binge drink, etc. Now, Joe Rogan was telling a story about how they were all at a campfire and Anthony just wanted to get obliterated. Now, I'm someone that I'm not against that completely. I think occasionally, fine. Get obliterated occasionally. But if it comes to any sort of consistent pattern of doing it, where it's very often, that's probably a problem, and it's probably going to impact our mental health. So I would get Anthony to tell me, hey, this is what's bothering me. And then I would get into, okay, do you think this is trauma related? Because there are some schools of thought that say it's all trauma related, and if we heal our traumas, all of our depressions and anxiety will go away. And I think if that helps someone, great. But I also think the healing of trauma part is a never-ending process as well. And I can't deny there's certainly a physical/scientific component, at least in my life, where taking supplements and herbs have absolutely helped my consciousness. And I would ask Anthony, hey, are you more on the depressed side? And I've told clients of mine about things like SAMe, for example. And SAMe seemed to click parts of their brain together that weren't working as well before. And that's not about healing trauma. That's a physical thing where perhaps it connected things in his brain, and my brain too, because I take it, that it actually really helped. And I think there's something to this where between the foods, the plastics, the soil, if the essential amino acids that are needed to help make neurotransmitters aren't in the foods that we're eating and perhaps are even being depleted by plastics, we have to do something to kind of make up for that. And some people who are a little more susceptible to anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses, yeah, it might impact them even more. So I would say, Anthony, if you're depressed, let's try a couple things here. Let's see if it would work. Now again, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not going to be prescribing any medicines. That's not what I do. But I do suggest supplements. I do suggest things like that sometimes. I suggest sharing honestly and open, preferably with other men, about how you feel in a non-judgment zone. That's what I would say. It's like Patty said, I'd rather have you cry on my shoulder this week than be at your funeral next week. Absolutely. And I try to get him comfortable talking about what's really bothering him. Now, a lot of people have a huge wall up. They only want to talk about things with women. I see that with a lot of guys. They don't feel comfortable sharing with other men, but they do want to open up to other women. And that can sometimes lead to other pitfalls. But I would say, hey, I get it, Anthony. I've felt all those same kinds of things before. The self-deletion fantasies, severe depression, the desire to escape, to get obliterated, to just use escapism and fantasy, the getting angry at people, not liking fans. Sure, get it. I understand, man. And perhaps he just needed a little bit of acceptance, because he's somebody that he did have a lot of people that really cared about him. And I hear some people say, well, the people who do this, they think the world is better off without them and that they're doing the rest of the world a favor. And I don't think this was true in Anthony's case. I don't think he was doing the rest of the world a favor. There's tons of people who were extremely impacted by his loss. Rogan, for one, people he's had on his show as a guest, his children, his ex-wife, even Asia. They're all people that were probably impacted, so I don't think that applies to him. But I just want to get him talking openly. Get the consciousness part down. That's number one. Now, then I would ask him about his drinking. I'm like, do you think this is a problem? And if this is something you're doing on a constant basis, you often want to get obliterated, and you feel depressed, guess what? Alcohol is a depressant. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. So maybe, perhaps being sober more would be a good step in the right direction for him. Again, if nothing changes, nothing changes. His thinking and his actions got him to where he was, so perhaps a change is in order. And again, how we do this and how we suggest this is a lot of it too. Being an ass about it probably won't get the best results, but being a little more on the understanding side, yeah, it could be huge. So the mental health piece for one, trying to address some of the physical components of the depression with some supplements. He had already done jiu-jitsu. He had some community. So we have to look at the things that are left. So that's the mental health. The sharing honestly and openly with certain people. That's a great thing too, knowing that people will be impacted by his loss. Also true. And then we have a mindset piece. Oh, excuse me, and the addiction piece was the other thing, right? Maybe don't drink as much. See if that helps. Try something different. See what he says to that. Then we would move on to two prongs, the mindset and how we view relationships. Because back when I used to struggle with one-itis, it is a dangerous mindset to have for men, thinking that this one woman is everything. And in reality, I would say, more than likely in this day and age, there is no soulmate. There is no one. You might find someone you work really well with, but to think that that one person is it, that's the only girl left, I would say, Anthony, there's probably tons of women out there that would really want to be with you and share their lives with you. Not just her, tons of them. And for Anthony, this wasn't an exaggeration. There's probably tons of women who really would have loved him and enjoyed his company. And I would say, Asia, I get how you feel right now about her, but feelings are not fact, and feelings are also not a good indicator of how we are doing. I bet you, if you looked at Asia's actions, you would think someone that you really cared about would talk to Anthony and say different things than what she was saying to him. And I would try to gently say to him and hold up the mirror, this is how she's acting. And if you practice radical self-respect, this probably isn't the way you would want a woman you really care about to be treating you. It's nothing against Asia. Sometimes it just happens, right? And I would say there's tons of other women out there that would love to be with you. Let's not narrow down the world to just her. And I've noticed in my own life when I'm severely depressed, that's kind of what happens, right? The world shrinks. Possibilities shrink. The world seems to narrow and constrict, and it doesn't seem like there's a way out. But guess what? And this is where 12-step fellowships like AA and NA really come into play. Sharing honestly about that stuff, again, preferably with other men, is one of the best ways out. Those things grow in the dark, and they get killed in the light. They get, in the light of exposure, they lose their power. But when you don't talk about it, they do grow in the dark, and they do become ugly monsters sometimes. But when we talk honestly about it, even if we're not feeling it, our egos might not like it, and might be very uncomfortable at first, might be ashamed or irritable about it, etc. But it absolutely helps. And then finally the mindset thing, and that kind of ties all four of these aspects together, right? The mental health, addiction, relationships, mindset, they all go hand in hand. They all feed off of one another. And so after I would say to him, hey, there's other women out here besides Asia. Let's not constrict the world to just her. For every one of Asia that's going to be careless with your heart, in your words, there's probably many that would not nearly be as careless as she is. So let's focus on those kinds of possibilities. But again, this is where feelings are dangerous, because feelings can trick us into thinking that's not true. They can trick us into thinking, nope, our world is just this is it, and it can really constrict on us and make us feel trapped. But it's a lie. It's certainly a lie. In the AA and NA world, they'll call it the disease thinking, right? The disease will tell you lots of lies because it wants you depressed, and ultimately it wants you dead. By hook or by crook, it wants you dead. Whether you do it yourself, whether you drink yourself to death, or whatever, that's what it wants. And it might be a crude analogy in some ways, but it might, because people might say, well, there's all sorts of nuance that's missing. But I think it fits often. Often there is a part of people like that is what they want. And I get it. And the way out is honest sharing. Pain shared is pain lessened. Exposing it to the light so that it dies. Share those thoughts. The darkest ones in particular, they're the most important ones to tell. And that's kind of what a 4-step is all about, where you share about your defects and your shortcomings, and you share about them with a sponsor. And hopefully they listen in a non-judgmental way. And it's supposed to be freeing. You've told someone your deepest, darkest stuff, and they still accept you. And that's a very powerful experience, that kind of acceptance after sharing some of the dark stuff. And for people who have been alcoholics and addicts, yeah, a lot of them have done some slimy stuff. And so when they share that, they get it off their chest, it's like a burden is lifted. It's like a weight off of their shoulders. And these are the kinds of things I would try to do for Anthony, right? I would say, hey, I get it. Because literally, there's nothing he could have said to me that would have surprised me, right? I'd been down a lot of the same roads he was, with addiction, with mental health, with one-itis, with becoming more bitter and negative, 1,000%. And I'd say, hey, it's okay. I totally get it. But share. And again, how we communicate this to our loved ones is big. Being the kind of person they feel comfortable telling this stuff to is big. Not trying to shove our opinions down their throat, but at first, just listening. Active listening in a non-judgmental way. That is extremely powerful. And then go through the line, right? Mental health. And sometimes the first thing to do is stop things, right? So if he's excessively drinking a lot, that would be one thing to stop. And again, I'm not against a good drinking session occasionally. Fine, go ahead and do that. And I have found in my own life where occasionally I'll drink and it seems like it'll scoop up things from my body, things that have been trapped, maybe feelings or emotions that have kind of gotten trapped in my day-to-day. Sometimes alcohol will bring them to the surface, and it's kind of like a spirit. That's why alcohol can be called spirits sometimes. And it brings them to the surface. Maybe the emotions or the feelings I'm having trouble expressing, alcohol will bring them up. And then after it's over, you kind of feel cleansed a little bit. Now granted, I wouldn't recommend this on a very consistent basis, but occasionally, I don't really see an issue with that. But I will say this, especially for people who go to AA, consistent drinking, for someone who's an alcoholic, will almost always make them depressed. So perhaps often the first step is to stop drinking. Then let's see if we're depressed after we stop drinking. If we're depressed after we stop drinking, maybe we need something else. Got to add proper sleep, diet, and exercise, right? And again, none of these tasks are easy. No, they are not. Like getting into an exercise program, that can be tough. Getting healthy sleep, that can be tough. And so once we've added that to our lives, take a look at supplementation. Let's see, what are your symptoms? Do you still feel depressed? Are you unable to focus? Or is maybe anxiety more of your issue? Whatever it is, there's supplements and amino acids that can address many of those things. Try one thing at a time and stop taking one thing at a time. And like I said, when I've suggested this to some of my coaching clients, a lot of them experience great results where they say, Jared, this one thing, it really helped me. It was able to help me to think better, to think clearly. I was able to feel more in control, and it just kind of felt like a missing piece was plugged in. And yeah, that can be the case for some people. And then with the relationship piece, knowing that if someone's not treating us well, or how we want to be treated, the radical self-respect way is to move on and find someone who will treat us better. And to not let the world constrict to just one woman. There's probably many women, especially in Anthony's case, that would have loved him and would have loved to share their lives with him. And lastly, again, the mindset piece, which ties in all of this, right? Understanding that self-deletion doesn't end the pain. It would just transfer it to somebody else. Knowing that if what we're doing doesn't seem to be working, that we probably need to try something different. And if we're feeling depressed, often that's what that means. We got to try something new, try something different. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And again, none of this is easy, but often it requires change and progressing forward one small step at a time. And again, none of this can be accomplished unless there's honest and open dialogue. If Anthony's not going to be honest with others about what he's thinking and feeling, it becomes extremely difficult to help him. Right? That's why honesty is number one. They say that in AA and NA a lot, that if someone's able to be honest, they have the ability to get better. But if someone can't be honest about what they're thinking and feeling, it becomes almost impossible to help them. So the first requirement is Anthony's comfortable enough to be honest. Hopefully, we are all the kinds of people for our friends that they do feel comfortable talking to, that they won't be judged, because if they think we'll judge them, perhaps they'll be less likely to reach out and be honest. So that's our side. To our friends, let's be the kind of person people can reach out to, right? So those are the four things really in a nutshell. And again, it falls on Anthony too to be honest, but I'll talk to him about mental health, talk to him about addiction, talk to him about relationships, and talk to him about mindset. Those are the four things I would do. I would get him to talk to me in an honest way, and I would tell him I would absolutely be non-judgmental. And sometimes the best way to help someone understand that is to share something dark on your side of the street. Be vulnerable a little bit, so it kind of gives them permission to say, okay, Jared said this. He's willing to go that far. Who am I to say what I should probably match his vulnerability here in this way and be honest about what's going on with me. He was just honest about himself. So these are just tidbits to actually help someone on the road forward. So if you have anything I missed, I would love to hear it in the comments section here. Let me know other kinds of things that you think might help someone in that scenario. If you felt this way before, feel free to comment that too. But all thoughts and comments are welcome. If you liked the video, like the video. And if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to the channel if you like stuff about radical self-respect. So with that, over and out.